What I'm going to do here for the first segment of the show is kind of encapsulate the Will Wade era as it has now come to a close. I've talked for the last 3 days about how disappointed I am about that because I follow this basketball program so closely. I pull for them. It's my alma mater. I love basketball and have thoroughly enjoyed Will Wade running LSU's basketball program. Obviously, the end of the era is going to be bumpy, and the next era is going to start on some terrible terms. But that doesn't, to me, right now, as I'm sitting here, take away from what we watched over the last 5 years. And I kind of want to encapsulate that and kind of put my thoughts on it as we walk into what he inherited and what he created here in Baton Rouge. There are some interesting numbers, some trends, and some things that I want to get to here. To put in perspective the team, the roster, the program that he inherited, they were coming off the worst season in the history of LSU basketball. It was a 2-16 league team, and this was the roster that put that number on the board. It was Brandon Sampson, Duop Reith, Antonio Blakeney, Elbert Robinson, Skylar Mays, Kieran Hayward, Brandon Jenkins, Jalen Patterson, Marshall Graves, Brian Bridgewater, Aaron Epps, Craig Victor, Wade Sims. They simply just were not at the level you need to be to compete in the Southeastern Conference, and the only guy on that team that was a significant contributor that you really needed to come back to see some results the following year was Antonio Blakeney, and he decided not to come back. He was going to pursue the NBA. He got on a G League team, played with the Bulls for a little bit, and he was the most talented player on that team, of course, a 5-star recruit. But there was really nothing coming back. It was going to be just as bad. And Will Wade took that over and overhauled this roster. And there were some guys from that roster that certainly contributed on Will Wade's first team that, as we remember, ended up in the NIT. Brandon Sampson, Duop Reith, Skylar Mays, those were guys that were difference makers on that team. Certainly Aaron Epps would qualify as that as well, Wade Sims. And then you look at Brandon Rashall, not really going to help you much. Darrell Edwards was a nice piece that he added. But he went and got Tremont Waters. That was the difference maker in that first year. And that's him having the ball in his hands and Skylar's improvement, along with Epps and Reith and Sampson stepping up, allowed LSU to go to Maui that Thanksgiving, the first year of the Wade era, and beat Michigan. And if you'll remember, that Michigan team they beat ended up being the national finalist, national runner-up. And they got through it and won 8 conference games and got into the NIT. And, of course, we remember, taking shots at our program. You've been living under a rock, that famous press conference he delivered after LSU beat ULL, and they're running through the RPI numbers, the rolling RPI numbers, and talking about how his wins against Louisiana College and Xavier and Loyola of New Orleans or whoever don't count. And he was in the middle of it, and he was intense, and he was fired up, and it was new, and he knew he was building something impressive. And so he took that roster that was totally inequipped to compete in the SEC, ended up nearing 500 and winning an NIT game before they went up to Utah and got beat. But then he started recruiting. And look, you can make your jokes about this portion of the memory telling, but the fact of the matter is that he went out there and recruited, and he signed the number 4 class in the country coming right out of that. Got Naz Reid and Emmett Williams, who were both 5-stars by 247. Javonte Smart, who had had 5 stars attached to his name at one point. Darius Days was in that class. Marlon Taylor he brought in that class as well. Andre Hyatt, who was a couple of years away and ended up redshirting that year, but he was in that class. It was the 4th-ranked class nationally, and we know what that team went on to do. They created an energy in that PMAC that we had been missing for a decade about. That Tennessee game will be famous, and I'll never forget walking into that Tennessee game. My parents had come down for it. They didn't visit Baton Rouge all that much, certainly not during basketball season, came down for a few football games a year. They're like, we're going to come watch the Tennessee game. I'm like, great, we're going. And we walked into the Tennessee game, and I look at my phone on Twitter, and I've got a tweet from whichever beat writer it may have been or TV guy, whoever. Tremont Waters will not play today. And I'm going, God. Got top 5 team in the country. They had just been number 1 in the country coming in. Got our chance here. We're trying to compete for the league title. Our best player's not playing. Full PMAC. And they got it done. Javonte put the team on his back. Skylar hit a huge 3. And they got it into overtime and won that game. Of course, that team wins the SEC and advances to the Sweet 16. They beat Baylor on the buzzer beater, and they get to Michigan State. And they had a chance in that game. Tremont led them back. they got within striking distance with about 6 minutes left. Michigan State was just too good. Of course, that Michigan State team went on to beat Duke 2 days later and advance. So that was a really, really good team. But that lit the fire around here. And, of course, you lost a couple of guys off that team. Nas left early, but you came back and signed a class that had Trent and Watford in it. You had to replace Tremont, but Skyler was back. And that team had its ups and downs. Charles Manning was a big piece of that puzzle. And it would have been a tournament team had COVID not have cut it short. They come back and sign the number 4 class in the country the next year. Cam Thomas, Imwani Wilkinson, Eric Gaines, Jalen Cooks, Alex Fudge, Sharif, Josh LeBlanc. Of course, that team had unbelievable offensive potential and had guys that, Javonte, Cam, and Trenton are all playing in the NBA right now. Tremont's been back and forth. But that team was so much fun to watch. Just unfortunate that they couldn't pack the PMAC for that. And every time you talk about something that was so great in this Will Wade era, there's a handicap to it, meaning, we went to the NCAA tournament, got to the Sweet 16, but Wade wasn't there because he was suspended and it was up in the air. And then we had this team that was going to be really fun with this first-round pick throwing up 25 points a game, but had COVID and couldn't fill the arena. Went to the NCAA tournament, had to be in Bloomington and Indianapolis in front of nobody. Ran into the Michigan team, weren't good enough up front. Then you brought in this class. I'll be curious to watch this class, wherever they may be, what their college careers are. Brandon Murray, Efton Reed, Justice Williams, and Eason will move on. Adam Miller, Xavier Pinson. Always brought talent. And in his 5 years, LSU was 108-53. He was accessible to the media. He was fun to listen to talk. I always talk about the Will Wade Show. And there was energy in this town between December and SEC play in baseball. That's missing most of my life. And there was energy in this town. In conference play, he was 56-34, won 62% of his games. And that includes the 8-10 first year. After that, you had 16-2, 12-6, 11-7. That was the most games anybody won in the conference over those 3 years. I had to go back to 2005 to 2009. Brady's last 3 years and then Trent's first year. That had a Final Four team in it and an SEC championship team in it. That team won 63% of its conference games, right on par with what LSU had done, but he was sustaining it. They went to 4 straight NCAA tournaments if you give them the COVID year for the first time since 1990, 1993. That is almost 30 years from now. And that's just what makes me sad because it's not easy to do. As I've talked about a couple times this week, Mississippi State and Georgia hired Final Four coaches, established guys. They were gone in a handful of years. Ben Howland, out. Tom Crean, out. Florida hired an up-and-coming guy. Louisiana Tech, ton of energy. Highly thought of. Goes to the Elite Eight. They'd have kicked him out the door. He just went to Georgia. No one takes the Georgia job over Florida. No one. Kentucky hires Billy Gillispie, who had a ton of success over at A&M. They were in the NIT, kicked him out the door. Avery Johnson, NBA coach, champion as a player. Failed at Alabama. It's hard to get right. And LSU got it right, in my opinion. You want to come to me and say that you've got to, quote unquote, do it the right way? I can't tell you that you're wrong. But I like winning. And I understand the nature of college basketball. And I was fine with Will Wade piloting my program. 3 top 10 classes, 2 top 5 classes, in the mix, in the tournament every year, got to the second weekend once, won a league title 2 years after the worst season in the history of the school. It's just sad. It makes me sad. And I've found in my Twitter musings, message board stuff, text messages with friends, phone calls, that most people agree with me. Not all, but most do. And moving forward, starting tomorrow, when we preview this LSU game with Iowa State, when you're in the tournament again, and even in the second hour when we start talking Wisconsin and Colgate, like, the page is turned. In the next 2 weeks, this ride's going to be over, and Scott Woodward will have some work to do. It'll be a tough job, and we won't have this discussion anymore. But for me, I just felt like it was something I wanted to do. I wanted to talk about because I loved it. And I mentioned this on Monday, and there's a personal side to this. When he took this basketball program over and did what he did in the first year, and I saw that signing class coming in, I saw Naz Reid, Emmett Williams, Javonte Smart, Darius Days, Marlon Taylor. I saw the class he was bringing in to pair with Tremont Waters and Skylar Mays, Duop Reith, Aaron Epps. Reith moved on, Epps. But when I saw that group coming in, I said, this is gonna be pretty good. And I'm selling insurance. I'm not on the radio. I'm not on Hanging with Hester. I'm not on doing morning. I'm just selling insurance. So I called up here to Guarantee Broadcasting. I said, hey, if I do a daily basketball podcast, 10, 15 minutes a day, can I put that on y'all's site? Like, yeah, go ahead. So I've told this story before. Like, I was discussing it with Matt Moscona. It's like, hey, we were talking. I'd had a couple drinks. He was like, you should do a daily basketball podcast. I was like, yeah, I could do that. Then I woke up the next morning and went, what did I just agree to do? I work what hours? I drive to New Orleans how many days a week? And I'm going to do a basketball podcast every morning? But I decided to do it. And I got that podcast, and it caught a little traction. I know a lot of y'all listen, and I could not thank y'all anymore for listening to Hoops with Hunt. And that year, they won the SEC, the Wade stuff, and the listenership built a little bit. I was able to get a sponsorship out of it, caught a little momentum. All of a sudden, I'm on Hester's show, doing some stuff in the morning, and all of a sudden, this slot comes open. And I don't think that I was offered this position because I did Hoops with Hunt, but I certainly don't think it hurt to have an on-air presence, to be on the website, to be following a team daily, to be a single voice broadcaster on that medium. That means a lot to me, and certainly put me in a position here. Helped. So there's a personal side of it too, and I think there's a lot of people that would agree that was really fun, and there's some really, really dark days ahead. But the good news is we're playing a team tomorrow in the NCAA tournament that went 0-18 in the Big 12 last year. There are going to be postseason bans very likely. There are going to be scholarship limitations very likely. The second those are lifted, if you've got the right guy in, you can make it work. But it's just a matter of getting the right guy in. That's going to be very difficult for Scott Woodward. We'll see.
Thanks so much for watching Hunt and Hill on YouTube.
Now do us a favor. Hit the red subscribe button below and throw us a like. We'll see you next time.